A very warm welcome to this seminar on security challenges in the Baltic Sea. We are web broadcasting this seminar, and you can also use Twitter, FPA Allmänna, if you would like to join us on Twitter. My name is Anna Wieslander, and I'm Secretary General of the Swedish Defense Association, Allmänna Försvarsföreningen. And this is our main event for this week. But we are also organizing together with a few others defense political talks with the political parties starting here at 9 o'clock each morning. So you're very welcome to join us in those as well. This seminar is made in collaboration with the Polish Embassy in Stockholm, and they have acted as NATO point of contact also and done a fantastic job with that throughout the year. And by the end of the week, we are facing a NATO summit in Warsaw, which is a very important meeting security-wise for this region, with lots of decisions hopefully made that will help improve the security situation here. What we are facing in the Baltic Sea region is a rapidly worsening security situation. I'm sure none of you in this audience have missed that development. What was once, just a few years ago, perhaps the most peaceful and prosperous regions in the world, now has become part of almost a strategic struggle, you can say, between Russia and the West. And we are in the middle of that, trying to handling it. Military activities have once again risen to a new level, a level of the Cold War. And there are lots of questions on what we can do to stabilize the situation and work for peace and stability and security in this region. So I'm pleased to open this seminar and give the word to a great friend of Sweden who also speaks perfect Swedish, but you will do this in English. It's Wieslaw Tarka, who is the Polish ambassador to Stockholm and Sweden. So please give us some introductory remarks.
God morgon. God morgon Visby, god morgon Gotland, god morgon Almedalen. Tack för inbjudan. But as said, I will speak in English this morning. So ladies and gentlemen, my presence here this morning is justified by two facts. One of those was mentioned that we have been acting as contact point embassy in NATO in Sweden and Stockholm. So we are representing and informing about NATO in Sweden. And what is important, we will do this 2 more years, so not only finishing by the end of the year, but we will continue the next year and 2018. So we will altogether have this position in 4 years. I'm very happy about this. But the second reason is, of course, because in 4 days, Poland will host NATO summit. That is important for our region. I will be brief. Today's security situation in our region is affected by the unpredictable behavior of Russia. Russia's aggressive posture towards neighbors and disregard for international law is a game changer. But the risks and fears are not distributed equally. So citizens of Tallin, Riga, Vilnius or Warsaw feel less safe than the citizens, let's say, of Berlin, Madrid or Rome. It is the role of NATO to change this situation, reassert the principle of equal security for all member states. And that is what the NATO summit in Warsaw is all about. The Newport package was a valuable, albeit temporary solution. Now we are working on the long-term adaptation of the alliance, or the so-called Warsaw package. One of key items in this package is forward presence of NATO on its eastern flank. The presence needs to be substantial, constant, and international. A constant presence doesn't necessarily mean NATO units permanently based in Poland. Temporary deployment of units with overlapping rotations can also create the effect of permanent presence, capable of deterring potential threats and defending us at the early stage of a possible crisis. But NATO is not only fixated on the East. Tools created by the Wales Summit, their Readiness Action Plan, RAP, and Very High Readiness Joint Task Force are also for the south. In autumn 2015, one of biggest NATO exercises in history took place on the Mediterranean, with wide participation of Poland. In February 2016, NATO agreed to send a maritime force to the Aegean Sea. Also in Warsaw, the alliance will use this 360 degrees approach to assure equal security and defense to all its neighbors. We are happy to have a broad participation of our Swedish friends at the summit, including Prime Minister Löfven, Minister of Foreign Affairs Margot Wallström, and Minister of Defense Peter Hultqvist, who is without here today. NATO members or not, our countries share the same values and concerns, so I'm convinced that Sweden will contribute to a successful NATO summit as well. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much. Just before you step down, I would like to ask you, there's not only been more regional cooperation on security and military in this past years and between NATO and Sweden and Finland, for instance, but also more increased bilateral cooperation, and not least between Sweden and Poland. So what does Poland have to gain from increasing security and military cooperation with Sweden in a bilateral way?
I think it is a win-win situation. We have at last realized that we are close neighbors, that we have common interest. We see the region and we perceive the situation in the region in a similar way. So I think if we act in a spirit of solidarity, we can achieve a lot. And just last week we have 2 visits in Poland, in Sweden from Poland. And the contacts were really very, very encouraging and very good. And that we really see on the situation very similarly.
And tonight we can listen to some Polish music.
Exactly. Thank you for the question. I would like to invite everyone at 6 o'clock, Hans Gotthard 60 at the corner of Drotten Gotthard 12. We will have excellent Polish guitarists playing Polish film music, for example, from Rosemary's Baby, from Polanski's film. So really come and enjoy with us. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. So it's time for our panel discussion. I'm very honored to welcome our distinguished guests for that. It's Swedish Defense Minister Peter Hultqvist and Jüri Luik, who is director of ICDS, a think tank in Tallin, but also a former Minister of Foreign Affairs, a Foreign Minister of Defense, ambassador to Russia, Moscow, and also to NATO. So broad experience. Great to have you here. I would like to give the floor to you. You have microphones on the table, exactly. Just to give a few major points on how you perceive the security challenge to the Baltic Sea now, and then we can have a discussion going on from that. So please, Peter, would you like to start?
Thank you so much, and thank you for the invitation to be here. And what I can say from a Swedish perspective, we have seen the change in the security perspective for a long time now. We saw it before Crimea happened. The first debates we have about the new security situation and the tendency to that it will be worse was 2006, 2007. And my feeling from that time is that there was very few of the parliamentary members that really believed in that. But we have also seen now that it was correct to start a discussion at that time. But it was first when Crimea happened and an annexation was a fact that it was on a broad basis accepted in Sweden that there was a real change in the security order in Europe. And now we are living with a new situation, and the threat is that Russia have shown that they are ready to use military capabilities to change and fulfill their political goals, and they have done this annexation against international law. And the main pillar in the European security order is that each country have the right to choose their own way and their own way to also secure themselves, to make their own decisions about European Union, about NATO or other security arrangements. We think that it's connected to the sovereignty to each state to do these sort of decisions. And when we have a power or a country that are ready to intervene in that sort of processes, it's very bad, and it's a threat against the security order and the security situation. And when that happened, you also need to do some sort of conclusions. And the Swedish Parliament have now decided to upgrade Swedish military capability until 2020. We have also decided to deepening all our cooperations with other countries. We go far with Finland. We have an agreement there to also prepare for scenarios beyond peace. And we're working together a lot around army exercises, exercises in air and on the sea. So we are trying to develop our cooperation in a very deep way. We have also changed our rules and regulations in a way that we now can exercise national defense also in other countries, and that makes it easier for us to also exercise together with the Baltic countries. We have participated in the cyber center in Tallin, Stratcom in Riga. We have also decided around the host nation support agreement in the Swedish Parliament with NATO. We have now an agreement with the United States to cooperate. It's very important because of that we want to strengthen the transatlantic link. We have a new agreement with Great Britain. We have an agreement with Denmark. We have one with Poland also. And one topic in that was that we are going to participate in the exercise Anaconda, and we have done that. So we try to build a security network around Sweden, but that is also a security network that in a positive way we hope have an impact on the other countries, and is one of the activities that are now going on in our region and our part of Europe. I think that cooperation and unity is very important to meet the security challenges. European Union must be united. Brexit is a very bad thing. It's a division in European Union. It's a split, and that can be used by negative forces. And it's also very negative that we see more of populistic, nationalistic, right-wing movements in Europe. That's very bad, because that also creates a situation of a split, because some of them are used by the Russians also to split. We also see that the Warsaw Summit now is very important. I think that unity and also very clear message from Great Britain is needed there, that they will fulfill their security goals and all the agreements they have with other states. I have talked to the defense minister in Britain around this, and he have assured me that they will do everything they can to be a partner for security also in the future, and that's very important for the stability. We are now investing here in Sweden in the island of Gotland. We are investing in a tank company and in a mechanized company, and we have also decided to exercise more with the Air Force, with the Navy, and also with air defense systems, ground-based air defense systems. And I think that that's a very important decision, and that's also a signal to the Baltic countries and to the region here that we see the importance from a military strategical point of view to do more on the island of Gotland. And I will also elect a new defense commission next year, and I hope and I think that Gotland will be one of the topics that they will discuss, and how to see if they have any suggestions about what we will do in the future here. So I think there is a lot of activities, and I think that we are trying to do what we can from the situation we have, and I think that we also will try to be a good partner to the other countries, and also show that Sweden are ready to take responsibility in this situation. Thank you.
Thank you. Please, Jüri.
Thank you very much. And let me say from the outset how happy and proud I am that I was invited here. I believe that there is a special bond between Sweden and Estonia in terms of security and economic relations. And I think in the present complicated security environment, we feel particularly close because we are the Baltic Sea nations who share the same values, who has a long shared history. And I think that is something to be valued and developed. Let me say a couple of words about the three aspects which influence the security in the Baltic Sea region, as I see it. I'm not a member of any government now, I'm a think tanker, so I'm free to say whatever I please. But I won't say anything dramatic.
Please.
Let me start by emphasizing the importance of the Warsaw Summit. I mean, Warsaw Summit is a sea change in how NATO does its business. We spoke a lot regarding the Baltic states and Poland about assurance, basically meaning that Estonians were worried and we had to assure Estonians that everything is okay. Now we are talking deterrence, which is a real military approach whereby you actually deter an opponent, showing the capabilities you have are serious and, more importantly, your intent, your political will is very serious. Part of that deterrence is what we called enhanced forward positioning of troops, basically putting troops to the Baltic states and to Poland, allied troops, which serve as a tripwire and also a symbol of allied unity. There will be 4 battalions in 3 Baltic states and 1 in Poland. In Estonia, the battalion, while there has not been an official statement, will most likely be a British battalion. And we sincerely hope that that will not be influenced in any way by the recent dramatic events in London. The Baltic states are particularly vulnerable because taking into consideration the capabilities which Russia has, Russia can, in times of crisis, effectively close the whole sea and airspace around the Baltic Sea, which effectively cuts us off from any allied assistance. That is why it is so very important also from the military point of view that troops are stationed in the Baltic region. But I think it is also important in a wider context that NATO is present as a force here and is showing the will of countries who share the same values to protect those values. We also see the attempts by Russia to limit the movement of NATO, for instance, ships or planes. I mean, it's more a symbolic gesture, but it's an attempt to harass our allies and to keep them, well, at least lower from the sort of the Kaliningrad line. I refer to the incident which happened with Donald Cook, the U.S. destroyer, which was harassed by the Russian plane. So NATO Warsaw Summit movement to the Baltic Sea region are clearly influencing the situation. Obviously, Russia, which has started the whole process of the change in how we look at the environment, plays an important role. What will be the next steps of the Russian Federation? It seems that they have chosen a fairly aggressive approach in organizing or reorganizing their armed forces on the Russian side, creating a tank army, creating new divisions, putting them forward on their own territory. This is a matter of great concern. Now, there have been some bits, like, for instance, President Niinistö's meeting with President Putin, where the issue of flying blindly or flying without transponders by the military planes was discussed. And Putin made a big gesture by saying that he will raise this issue in the NATO-Russia Council, and this will be a matter of negotiations. The fact is that Russians should just switch on their transponders. I mean, that would be the easiest way to solve this issue. Clearly not something which is happening at this very moment. And obviously, EU is a great influencer in our region, and as the minister already said, Brexit is a serious, serious problem for other EU members as well. I mean, we can behave like saying, well, it doesn't have any influence in NATO, Great Britain will still be with us, etc., etc. To some extent, it's true. But the fact is that many people in Great Britain didn't appreciate the idea of solidarity, of like-minded nations. That was something which was put under question, kind of the national approach versus the unified approach. And that, I think, was the biggest problem. So I'll end with that. These are the 3 points I wanted to bring.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Jüri. I would like to come back to Peter and the NATO summit, because for the first time, actually, Sweden with heads of state will sit with NATO, and Sweden and Finland are invited to have a discussion on Baltic Sea security. And you mentioned here Swedish expectations on UK messages, but then what will be the main Swedish message at such an occasion?
Thank you. We are very grateful that we are now invited, all of us, Prime Minister, Foreign Minister and Defense Minister, and we have also asked for a discussion with NATO around the security in Baltic Sea, and we also want to have that on a regular basis, because the situation will develop and new things and will happen. I think that one thing that is very important to discuss is code of conduct. We need to have some sort of agreement around how to behave in an unsafe and in a safe and secure way, because we see too much of unsafe behavior and unprofessional behavior on the Baltic Sea. We have seen these flights very close to sea vessels. Sweden, we have seen it to also United States. We have seen also that flights very close to aircrafts, and that's very dangerous, because if something happened, it can be a chain of developments that we not can handle in a constructive way. I think that is something we need to handle and deal with. Then it's also a question of the long term of balance in this region. Because what we have seen is a change of the European security order, and we see more of military exercise, more of intelligence activities, and more of everything. and when you see this environment are growing, then you also have to act by yourself. And from the Swedish point of view, we see it as a natural thing to do it together with others. And then it's a question about exercises. Baltops is one very important cold response that we had in Norway. It's very important, but we also have Arctic Challenge exercise, and we have cross-border training. Cross-border training between Sweden, Norway, and Finland in the northern part of these countries are exercises that are going on all the time, 40 times a year, and in that way it creates more of stability. That is an example that we can discuss also in other parts of our region to make stabilization. different countries participate together, do things together, and show some sort of military force or strengthness together. So we are open-minded.
Can we foresee, you mentioned that we have changed our regulations so that we can exercise with other countries more around national defense issues. Can we expect Sweden to participate more in those kind of exercises in this region?
We have changed these regulations now, and that makes it easier for us, for example, to participate in exercises in the Baltic countries. And so I think we are planning now also for doing that. Spring Storm is one example. It's an Estonian exercise, very important. So I think that discussion with NATO on a regular basis about the development in the Baltic Sea area. And I also think that this NATO participation and also from United States in the Baltics are very important because it makes the threshold also a little bit higher. But now I only talk about the strategy to handle the hard side of the security challenge. We also have the more soft side with diplomacy and dialogue and that sort of things, and that's also important.
Some would argue that for deterrence and dialogue, you need to be strong in order to have a dialogue, and other ones would argue that if you're too strong, you escalate the situation and there is no road to dialogue. What's your view? You can both reflect on that a bit.
You need both. You need both sides. You need to build military capability. You need to do this together. You need unity. And if you have that sort of things as a basic platform, then you also can have a dialogue in a better way. And I think European Union can be one organization that can be a platform for dialogue. And I also say that European Union are responsible for the European Union sanctions. And from the Swedish side, we've been very clear that there must be sanctions and we have to continue with them. And we are working together with others for that. And because of that, the European Union has a position to be that sort of partner for dialogue. So unity is very important to have a strong position in a dialogue.
Jüri, please, if you have a reflection on the balance between dialogue and deterrence.
Yeah, thank you. Well, this is one of the classical questions. I fall to the camp where I believe that strength develops also the need for a dialogue or the need to reduce tensions. At the moment, unfortunately, when we think about the diplomatic track on arms control, on confidence-building measures, for instance, the Vienna document, which you would logically think would serve as beneficial to all sides, to all parties. The fact is that Russia has effectively blocked the development of the Vienna document, while we could introduce limitations to military maneuvers, movement of troops, etc., etc. So I think we have to admit that we need strength and clarity, and that develops the atmosphere also for dialogue. Because we are dealing with a person who said, basically, and I paraphrase here, that Russia is standing up from its knees, sort of making the security order of Europe to change. And we cannot presume that such a political figure would just say tomorrow, let's do some kind of confidence-building measures, etc., etc. This is simply unrealistic at this very moment.
But thank you. On deterrence, you mentioned NATO will decide upon 4 battalions or battle groups, one in each Baltic country and Poland, that's expected, and that there is a big vulnerability on air and space due to the A2AD capabilities in Kaliningrad. But there is also a vulnerability in the land sector with the so-called Suwalki gap between Belarus and Kaliningrad. It's about 100 kilometers, and that's the only access point for Allied forces to reinforce through land the Baltic states. Do you believe that the decisions now taken at the Warsaw Summit, are they enough to deter and even to be able to handle perhaps a contested environment? Or what's your perception? Where are we now? Are we finished, so to say, with building deterrence, or is NATO finished with that?
I'd like to say two things here. One is it's clear that you cannot deter anybody with one battalion. I mean, it's absolutely clear. But if you look at the last cycle of exercises, Anaconda, where Sweden also participated, but for instance, Saber Strike, which was mainly happening on the territory of Estonia, you saw that the United States brought a number of high-tech measures, high-tech equipment, like, I mean, B-52 is an old plane, but if you have stuff in there, it can be very modern. The United States also brought in some of their very high-tech, for instance, long-range rocket artillery, etc., etc. So we are not dealing only with one battalion. The whole might of the alliance should be behind that and should credibly be behind that. Now, the fact is that to protect and help the Baltic states in a time of crisis, you would preferably need Swedish support. I'm not going political here. This is a. You look at the map and it's evident to everybody, especially that there is another very narrow pathway, which is, as you said, the Suwałki Gap. When you speak about the land reinforcements. But that raises a number of questions. Sweden clearly not member of the alliance, and should Sweden help the Baltic states in crisis time, there is an automatic question: what is the responsibility of the alliance here? I mean, we cannot say, yes, you helped us, but if something happens to you, you are on your own, because you are not member of the alliance. It's impossible. Politically, strategically, it's impossible. So these issues should be discussed both politically and in other ways.
It's very interesting that you raised that, and I think also, Peter, you have, we have all read about war games that have been conducted, reported from the US Pentagon Games, and we have also had various kinds of games playing out, showing that it would be very useful to get access through Swedish airspace, for instance, and not only that, some would argue even some territory to lend support to the defense of the Baltics. Can the Baltic states count on Sweden in this regard, even though we are not a member of the alliance?
Thank you for that question. What I can say is that in our analysis that the Swedish Parliament also have decided to support is that we cannot see any scenario that only is something that will be on one country in this area. If something happened one country, we are all in some way involved, and it will have an impact on all of us. And what we are trying to do now is to create a security network between all these countries. We are exercising together. We are also discussing different sort of scenarios. We are trying to connect more and more to each other. And that's also that's a practical way to make the threshold a little bit higher. But it's also a way of together also to say that we try to do something here to create more of security and stability, so not the day when we have a war will come. Because we prepare in a way so we maybe have some sort of deterrence effect. But it's also very important in that sort of scenarios to have support from other European countries and also the transatlantic link from United States. And we have now made an agreement from the Swedish side with the US to do some things together on interoperability, exercises, material, research, and international operations. And that's a lot to involve United States also in this environment, and that's a step also for Sweden to take. We have a long history with the US, but now we also have this agreement. And what will happen then in a crisis situation? It's not easy to say, because everything we say is from a theoretical point of view. The most important thing just now is to build channels for communication, and that the people on different sort of positions in the systems in the different countries know each other, so they know how to contact, how to discuss, and we also have forums that we can see how should we share the burden in a situation of crisis. We haven't said that we have any defense obligations to anybody, but we see that we have a geographical position when we need to do these sort of things before something happens, and also to hindering that it happened.
So that is one thing we are working on right now.
Yeah, we are working on that right now, and I think that we have taken some steps here, and I think that that's a way to handle the situation. But everything Sweden do, and that's very important, that's that our view is to keep the peace and keep the stability and keep some sort of decent order of human living in this area. And that's also a reason why we are also clear around the message that we cannot accept Crimea. Because if we accept Crimea and say it's business as usual, then we accept also that so-called great powers have the right to a backyard. And if we say that they have a right to a backyard, then we are also a part of some sort of backyard. We cannot have it like that. We need to have this respect for sovereignty. That's very important for all of us.
But if deterrence fails, and we still would need to take a decision on access to our airspace, how fast could we do that?
I can answer you very short way. I can have a very deep discussion about it, but I will not have it, because if you come to that situation, and I think all of you understands that, then we make the decisions about that. And then we have to see what is the whole scenario, and what is the Swedish role, and what is the Finnish role, what is the Baltics, what is the Denmark, Poland, and so on. So it's not a wise thing for me to say that and that just now, because then I open up the door for so many speculations, and I do not want to do that, and I do not want to talk about classified questions. And for another thing is that scenarios and exercises is one thing, reality is another thing. And a thing that I think we should think about, all of us, is that we always talk about scenario. Will Sweden, can we defend ourselves for 1 week, for example, in a specific scenario? But we never know what is the reality and how will that real scenario looks like, and what will we do at that time. So we can have wrong in all these exercise scenarios.
One question that you both emphasized has been the unity of the European Union, and that turns also into the broader. We talk a lot about military resources, but that actually you also both mention hybrid threats and information, the importance of information, cyber threats, and these kinds of things. But what I'm aiming at is more the resilience of our societies, how we are working with not looking only at external threats, but also scrutinizing ourselves a bit, and to see how are we strong enough to stand up for our own institutions, the way we let information and media work, and so on. And that is also a big discussion these days. What can we do together in the Baltic Sea region on these aspects, apart from what we already are doing? What would you like to see the next steps? Yes, please, if Jüri starts, then Peter can finish.
I couldn't agree more. First, let me say that I agree 150% with what the minister said about the Baltic states, Sweden, and the role of how we sort of develop this issue. This is a particular issue where, in practice, the settlement would probably work better than in theory. I mean, it's clear that when something happens, Sweden, as you said, and the Baltic states will be both immediately involved. Now, what are the legal ramifications of that? It's difficult to determine at the moment, but I'm sure we will find ways to work in crisis time. Now, coming back to the hybrid threat, again, I think it is very important to guarantee the resilience of our societies. The fact is that a democratic society has difficulties in fighting against a deliberate, aggressive propaganda if this is developed by another country. So we have to do it, but we have to do it using the democratic means which are at our disposal. Cyber, the same thing. I would have to note that Warsaw summit will take another fundamental decision, which is to determine that cyberspace is one of the operational domains, which effectively means it opens up the whole territory for the alliance to act, of course, defensively in the cyberspace. So the alliance will add a military dimension to the cyber conflicts, and I think this is a very, very important aspect. Now, when it comes to hybrid, then we occasionally face the approach where people would come to Estonia and say, yeah, well, your main problem is not military aggression, but it's various hybrid threats, this and that. And we say, don't worry about that. We can handle all the hybrid threats. We have political, economic, and even military means, if necessary, to handle that. What we cannot handle is the full-fledged invasion. That is where we need the allied assistance and the assistance of our friends.
Thank you. We are running out of time, so this will be the last comment. I'll give it to Minister Hultqvist, please.
Okay, total defense was something that Sweden once upon a time were very well developed on, and the Finnish, in Finland they make the copy of the Swedish total defense, and they still have it, but we have withdrawn a lot of our capabilities. So now we have to go to Finland to have study visits to see how we are going to refurbish our organization and coming back to a higher level of capability. But I think that total defense is something we now have to work with, and we have gotten a report from the defense forces and the Authority for Civilian Defense in Sweden, and that's the start of a process when we are trying to make priorities about how we shall start this process, because we have a very long lesson to do here and a lot of work to do. But one thing we have done, and that's a developing process that now has started, it's about cyber capabilities. We have said in a decision in the parliament that we will go from defensive cyber capabilities to also active cyber capabilities. And that is, from a strategical point of view, a very important decision, because that also gives us a capability to act and answer on attacks in a real crisis situation. So this is something we are working with now, and it's not an easy thing, but it's an area we need to develop ourselves in. We also have decided to be a partner in the cyber center in Tallin and in Stratcom in Riga, and that's not a coincidence, because we need to get the information and be a partner in this sort of cooperation to have a higher level of knowledge and also maybe give some knowledge from time to time. So I think that if we can work together in a deeper way here, I think that can be a good thing. I know also that is plans in another country to create and start a hybrid center, and that can also be something to participate in, because that is also a scenario where we have to learn more. Hybrid warfare is nothing new. It has been it's a very, very old thing that are connected to war in the war history all the time. But now we have our history just now, and it was re-announced when the Russians annexed Crimea, and the world was a little bit confused about what was really happening here. But now we have seen that also in reality in our time, and now we also have to make the right conclusions around it. We also can see all this propaganda in different channels on the websites and also in TV with Russia Today as an example, that make a message that Europe is divided, we are splitted, and we are a continent in decadence. And then we have a president or a leader in Russia that are a very strong man and can solve the problems. That's the easy picture they give. And I'm also a little bit worried now when I see that Donald Trump in the United States have said that Putin is a great leader, and also I see that Putin have responded and said that Trump is a very interesting person. so I think that that is also a challenge. We must fight against this sort of right-wing populism. I think that this is very bad for the world. And I will finally say that I am following the presidential election in the United States very closely, because it's important for all the world who will be the next president. And because it's had a direct impact on us all. So I think that if we can have responsibility and stability and democratical values and all these sort of normal things in the US leadership, it's very important for all of us. And I really hope that Hillary will be the next president. Now I got a little bit too long for, but that's my position.
Great. Well, I think these words will conclude the seminar. So thank you very much for coming. And